Inside Rikers Island, shocking prison stories and gangs documentary. The body in the showers. The night began with the sound of clanging metal, a noise that echoed through the concrete labyrinth of Rikers Island like a warning bell. Correction officers rushed down the dimly lit corridor of the Anna M. Cross Center, the largest jail on the island. Their boots hit the ground in a chaotic rhythm, radios blaring half-coherent codes. Inmates pressed their faces to the steel bars, shouting, laughing, or whispering in the shadows. Something had gone terribly wrong in the south wing. Inside the communal showers, steam clung to the walls like a shroud. Water dripped from broken faucets, forming small pools on the cracked tiles. At first glance, it looked like another fight, the kind that broke out every night over cigarettes, contraband phones, or grudges too old to remember. But when the guards pushed through the crowd, they found a body sprawled in the corner. The inmate's face was swollen beyond recognition, his jumpsuit soaked in water and blood. A crude shank made from melted toothbrush plastic and sharpened metal jutted from his chest. Carved into the flesh of his arm were 3 jagged letters: BGF, the Black Guerrilla Family. Even for Rikers, this was brutal. Everyone knew the gangs ran the tiers, but carving an insignia into a corpse wasn't just a murder, it was a message. The victim was later identified as Luis "Spider" Ortiz, a 23-year-old awaiting trial for armed robbery. He had no known ties to the BGF. In fact, most inmates whispered that Spider ran errands for the Trinitarios, a Dominican gang with a bloody reputation inside New York's jails. That alone made the killing strange. Why would the BGF claim him? And why in such a public, theatrical way? Detective Marcus Hale of the NYPD's Correction Intelligence Unit was called in before dawn. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that carried years of hard cases, Hale had walked into Rikers more times than he cared to count. But something about the Ortiz killing gnawed at him. It wasn't the violence, he had seen plenty of that. It was the performance. The BGF didn't usually leave calling cards. They preferred silence, control, and discipline. Hale walked the showers, examining every inch. The shank was crude but effective, likely passed through the kitchen or the laundry. Spider's pockets were empty. No cash, no phone, no notes. Only the letters on his arm remained, carved deep and ugly, as if whoever did it wanted him to be remembered this way. The first round of interviews yielded nothing but hostility. Inmates sneered at the detectives, officers shrugged, and everyone insisted they saw nothing. The only consistency was the silence. It was as if the entire block had agreed to shut their mouths at once. But then a correction officer named Daniels broke rank. Nervous, chain-smoking, he told Hale he'd noticed something strange the night before. Spider had been arguing with another inmate in the yard, a man known as Tyrone Big T. Wallace, a ranking member of the Bloods. Daniels swore it looked heated, but when he approached, both men went quiet. That revelation cracked the case open, but it made things more confusing. If Spider was running with the Trinitarios, why was he beefing with the Bloods? And where did the BGF come into play? As Hale dug deeper, the prison politics began to surface. Rikers wasn't one gang versus another, it was a shifting map of alliances, betrayals, and power plays. The BGF rarely clashed directly with the Bloods or Trinitarios. Instead, they thrived by manipulating disputes from the shadows. If Ortiz was caught in the middle of something bigger, his murder might not be personal at all. It could be a spark in a war waiting to erupt. The next day, Hale requested surveillance footage from the cameras near the south wing showers. He sat in a cramped control room, eyes fixed on the flickering black and white feed. At 2:14 a.m., Spider appeared on screen, walking alone toward the showers. He looked calm, even casual. 30 seconds later, 2 other figures followed. Both wore prison-issued jumpsuits with hoods pulled tight over their heads. The camera quality was poor, but one detail stood out: a tattoo creeping from the hand of one man, stretching up toward his wrist. A dark, unmistakable serpent. Hale froze the frame. He'd seen that tattoo before. The serpent belonged to Michael "Venom" Green, a BGF enforcer serving a 15-year sentence for attempted murder. Known for his cold precision, Venom was exactly the kind of man who would turn a killing into a message. But there was a problem. Green was supposed to be locked down in a different wing the night of the murder. Hale checked the logs. Officially, Venom had been in his cell. No movement, no transfers, nothing. On paper, he had an airtight alibi. That left only 2 possibilities. Either the footage was a mistake, or someone on the inside had moved Green, unlocked doors, and erased the evidence. The deeper Hale went, the more dangerous it became. The silence from the inmates was one thing, but when correction officers started dodging questions, Hale knew something bigger was at play. Corruption at Rikers wasn't new, But this felt coordinated, deliberate. Someone wanted Spider dead, and someone with power had made sure it happened. By the third day, rumors spread like wildfire. Some said Spider had been caught smuggling drugs into the jail. Others claimed he had stolen from the Trinitarios, and the BGF had been paid to make an example of him. A few whispered something even darker, that Spider had been working with the authorities, feeding information about contraband routes and dirty officers. If that was true, his death wasn't just a gang killing. It was an execution. Then came the break Hale wasn't expecting. A contraband phone was found in Spider's cell, hidden in the mattress. On it were text messages and call logs linking him to an anonymous contact saved only as Ghost. The messages hinted at meetings, trades, and payoffs. The most recent text, sent only hours before his death, read, "It's done. But they know. Don't trust anyone. Meet me in the basement." The basement. Rikers was a city within a city, and beneath the blocks were old maintenance tunnels, storage rooms, and forgotten spaces where deals were made and bodies sometimes disappeared. Hale had walked those basements before, but now the word felt like a trap. Still, he had no choice. He ordered a sweep of the basement near Spider's wing. 4 hours, the officers combed through dust and shadows, finding nothing but broken pipes and rusted equipment. Then, at the far end of a locked utility room, a steel door was forced open. What lay behind it wasn't another body. It was worse. Dozens of ledgers stacked neatly on a table, each filled with names, dates, and dollar amounts. Payments, deals, contraband routes. And mixed among the pages were signatures that didn't belong to inmates at all. They belonged to correction officers. Spider hadn't just been a petty runner. He had been documenting an entire network of corruption inside Rikers. And now, his blood was on the floor because of it. Hale stared at the ledgers, realizing what this meant. The gangs weren't just fighting for power. They were working hand in hand with the very people paid to keep them locked up. And Spider? He had gotten too close. But before Hale could process it, Daniels, the nervous correction officer who had tipped him off about Spider's fight, suddenly disappeared. His locker was cleaned out. His car abandoned in Queens. No sign of him anywhere. And just like that, the silence of Rikers closed in again. Daniels vanishes right after Spider's secret is uncovered, hinting that the conspiracy goes deeper and more dangerous than anyone thought. The disappearing officer. Detective Marcus Hale stared at the ledgers laid out across the table, his hands hovering above the brittle pages as if touching them might set off an explosion. Each book was a record of corruption so detailed, so damning, it was almost unbelievable. The names of correction officers were written in neat columns, matched with dates and amounts. Some payments were small, a few $100s slipped under the table. Others were staggering, thousands of dollars paid for shipments of drugs, cell phones, or weapons smuggled past the walls. The gangs inside Rikers hadn't just infiltrated the jail. They had turned the staff into partners. And now Officer Daniels, the one man who dared whisper the truth, was gone. At first, Hale thought Daniels might have fled out of fear. But the details told a darker story. His locker cleaned out. His car abandoned. No withdrawals from his bank account, no use of his phone. It didn't look like a man running. It looked like a man erased. Hale left the basement with the ledgers sealed in evidence bags, his mind racing. If Spider had been keeping track of this conspiracy, then he hadn't been working alone. Somewhere in the jail, maybe even outside, there had to be another player. Someone who wanted this information exposed. Someone Spider trusted enough to risk his life. But trust inside Rikers was a weapon, and Hale knew better than to believe anyone at face value. He started with Spider's known associates. Through informants, he pieced together that Spider had been close with a small circle of inmates who weren't affiliated with major gangs. Unusual for Rikers, where survival meant choosing sides. Among them was a quiet Puerto Rican inmate named Mateo Rivera, locked up on a weapons charge. Mateo had no gang tattoos, no reputation for violence. But Spider had shared his meals with him almost daily. When Hale sat across from Rivera in the visitation room, the inmate's eyes flicked nervously around the space before landing on Hale. "You think I don't know why you're here?" Mateo said, his voice low. Spider was in deep. Too deep. They told him to stop writing things down. He didn't listen. "Who's they?" Hale pressed. Mateo leaned forward, lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. "Everybody. Bloods, Trinis, BGF. Even the COs. Spider thought he could play hero. Thought he could expose them. But you don't expose Rikers. You just get buried in it." Hale pushed the ledger toward him. "Did he ever talk about a partner? Someone on the outside?" Mateo's jaw tightened. He mentioned a name once. Just one. Said if anything happened to him, I should remember it. The detective's pulse quickened. What name? Mateo hesitated, scanning the room again as if the walls themselves were listening. Finally, he muttered a single word. Ghost. The same contact in Spider's phone. Before Hale could ask more, the room's door slammed open. A correction officer stormed in, eyes locked on Mateo. Time's up. The officer yanked Mateo from his chair and dragged him toward the exit, ignoring Hale's protests. Hale followed, demanding another minute, but the officer slammed the door between them, leaving Hale staring at the reinforced glass. By the time Hale pushed through the paperwork to request another interview, Rivera had been transferred, without notice, to another block. When Hale tried to track him down, the record showed nothing. Mateo Rivera no longer existed in the system. 2 witnesses gone in 2 days. Hale's gut twisted. This wasn't sloppy bureaucracy. This was a cleanup operation. Someone was pulling strings from deep inside, erasing anyone who might unravel the web Spider had started. That night, Hale drove through Queens, replaying the details in his head. Daniels vanished. Rivera disappeared. Spider dead. And always the same shadowy thread, Ghost. But who was Ghost? The answer came from an unexpected place. Hale's phone buzzed as he parked outside a diner, the anonymous caller ID flashing across the screen. Against his better judgment, he answered. A distorted voice hissed through the line. You're getting close, detective. Too close. Hale gripped the phone. Who is this? You're digging in places that don't belong to you. Leave the ledgers where they are. Forget Spider. Forget Daniels. Or you'll end up the same way. Is this Ghost? Hale shot back. Silence. Then a chilling laugh before the line went dead. Hale sat frozen in the car, the sound still echoing in his ears. Ghost wasn't just a name in Spider's phone. He was real. Watching. And he had access to Hale's movements. The next morning, the danger became impossible to ignore. As Hale walked out of his apartment building in Brooklyn, he noticed the brake lines on his car had been cut. The message was clear. Back off or the next accident wouldn't be a near miss. But Hale wasn't backing off. He doubled security around the ledgers, locking them in an off-site evidence vault. Then he went back into Rikers, this time without notifying the staff ahead of time. He needed to catch them off guard. Inside, the tension was boiling. Rumors of Spider's murder had ignited fear. Gangs whispered about a coming war. The Trinitarios blamed the BGF, the Bloods blamed the Trinitarios, and the officers blamed everyone but themselves. But in the chaos, Hale saw something no one else was watching. A pattern. The ledgers showed payments lining up with shifts, with transfers, with sudden mistakes in records. It wasn't random. It was systemic. And if the gangs were cooperating across lines, then Ghost wasn't just a single man. Ghost was a role. A mask anyone could wear. That realization chilled him more than any threat. Later that day, as Hale walked down the corridor past C Block, an inmate suddenly lunged from a cell, shoving a folded scrap of paper into his hand before guards wrestled him back. Hale slipped it into his pocket and walked calmly out of sight. In the stairwell, he unfolded the note. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. They're coming tonight. Check the laundry. Trust no one. Hale's stomach dropped. Tonight. Laundry. The prison laundry was notorious for being a smuggling hub. Drugs, phones, weapons, all passed through bags of sheets and uniforms. If they were moving something tonight, it wasn't just contraband. It might be a hit. Hale assembled a small covert team, keeping the plan off the official record. That evening, they positioned themselves near the laundry facility, concealed behind crates and steel doors. The air smelled of bleach and sweat, the hum of industrial washers filling the silence. At midnight, movement. 2 officers wheeled in carts piled high with laundry bags. Behind them, 3 inmates trailed quietly, their eyes darting like cornered animals. Hale watched as one officer unzipped a bag, not to toss in sheets but to pull out a black duffel. Inside were guns. Real guns. Not shanks or improvised weapons. Firearms disassembled and wrapped in cloth. Smuggled straight into Rikers. Hale's breath caught. This wasn't just corruption. This was an armory being built inside a jail. Whoever controlled it wasn't planning to survive Rikers. They were planning to rule it. Before Hale could move, a voice rang out behind him. I told you to walk away, detective. He turned slowly, his gun halfway raised, only to see the last person he expected. Officer Daniels. Alive. Armed. And pointing a pistol straight at Hale's chest. Daniels, thought to be missing, reappears, but instead of being a victim, he's in the middle of the conspiracy, standing between Hale and the truth. Ghost in the shadows. The muzzle of Daniel's pistol gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the laundry room. His hands didn't shake, his eyes didn't blink. This wasn't the same nervous officer who had chain-smoked in front of Hale just days earlier. "Drop it, detective," Daniel said, his voice flat. "This doesn't concern you anymore." Hale didn't move. Behind him, his small team shifted uneasily, weapons half-raised, waiting for his signal. But Hale's focus was locked on Daniel's. "You're Ghost," Hale said. Daniel smiled thinly. "Ghost isn't a person. It's an operation. A lifeline. You think gangs run Rikers? No, we do. The officers. We decide who lives, who dies, who eats, who bleeds. The inmates are pawns. The gangs are tools. And Spider? He forgot his place." He motioned toward the duffel bags filled with firearms. "This is just the beginning. We're building something bigger than Rikers. With these walls and these men under control, we'll control New York from the inside out. Courts, streets, even the cops who think they're investigating us." Hale felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Spider hadn't been fighting a single gang. He had stumbled onto an empire. But Daniels wasn't finished. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Hale could hear. "And you're not leaving here alive." The first shot rang out, echoing like thunder through the concrete chamber. Hale ducked instinctively, returning fire. Chaos erupted. Inmates scattered. Officers shouted. Bullets ripped through carts of laundry, sending feathers and cloth exploding into the air like smoke. One of Hale's men went down, blood spilling across the floor. Another dragged him behind cover as Hale pushed forward, firing until Daniels retreated deeper into the facility. The chase was frantic, weaving through steam-filled hallways, past rusted pipes and rows of washers. Daniels moved like a man who knew every blind corner, every escape route. Twice, Hale almost lost him. Twice, Daniels doubled back with precision, laying ambushes that forced Hale to burn through ammo. Finally, they crashed into a boiler room. The air was suffocating, heavy with heat. Daniels ducked behind a furnace, shouting over the clanging machinery. "You're too late, Hale. Even if you kill me, Ghost doesn't die. It spreads. Another officer will step in. Another ledger will be written. We're everywhere." Hale edged closer, using the pipes as cover. His heart pounded, not just from the fight, but from the chilling truth in Daniel's words. Ghost wasn't a man. Ghost was a system. A network of corruption feeding off fear and greed. Spider had tried to fight it with paper and ink. Hale was fighting it with a gun. And both felt equally hopeless. Then Daniels lunged, firing wildly. Hale dropped to the ground, rolling between pipes and squeezed off 2 shots. Daniels staggered, the gun slipping from his hand, blood blooming across his uniform. He collapsed against the furnace, coughing, still smiling through the crimson. "You think you won, detective?" Daniels rasped. "Check the ledgers again. Look at the last page." And with that, his eyes went glassy. Daniels was gone. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of steam. Hale stood frozen, his pistol trembling in his hand. For a moment he felt no victory, only dread. When the smoke cleared and the scene was secured, Hale returned to the evidence vault. The ledgers were waiting, sealed and untouched. He flipped through page after page of names and numbers, the pattern blurring together, until he reached the final page of Spider's ledger. There, written in Spider's jagged handwriting, was a single sentence. "The real Ghost is wearing a badge. Below it, a name. Marcus Hale." The detective's blood ran cold. It wasn't possible. He hadn't written it. He'd never met Spider. But there it was, in black and white, a message meant to destroy him. As word of the firefight spread through the jail, whispers grew. Some said Hale had executed Daniels to cover his own tracks. Others said Spider's ledger had revealed him as the mastermind all along. By the time Hale walked out of Rikers that night, every eye, inmate, officer, investigator, looked at him with suspicion. On the streets outside, reporters swarmed, demanding answers. Hale pushed past them, his jaw tight, his mind reeling. Someone had planted his name. Someone had turned Spider's work into a weapon against him. And now he wasn't just hunting Ghost. He was becoming Ghost in the eyes of everyone else. Weeks later, the fallout was devastating. Internal Affairs launched an investigation into Hale. Colleagues distanced themselves. Cases he had worked on for years were reopened, every detail questioned. The press branded him as the Ghost Detective. But the killings didn't stop. 3 months after Daniel's death, another inmate was found in the showers, throat slit, the letters BGF carved into his arm. A phone hidden in the cell carried a single message, sent minutes before the murder. It never ends. Ghost lives. Hale read the report alone in his apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds. He knew then what Spider had realized too late. Rikers wasn't just a jail. It was a machine. A living, breathing organism that consumed anyone who tried to expose it. The gangs. The officers. The system. They weren't separate. They were all ghost. And as Hale stared into the darkness, he wondered if the next body would be his. The conspiracy frames Detective Hale himself as Ghost, making him both the hunter and the hunted. Meanwhile, the killings continue, proving the corruption is bigger than any one man, and unstoppable.